I love CEE. I think it's the most fascinating region, not just in terms of growth and potential. I love the narrative arc. It's changed so much. It used to be the place you go to save a little bit of money, make your margins look better. And now we see this huge wave of successful startups that are global players coming out of CEE. And I think that narrative is fantastic. And the fact that Deel can play a part, at least a small part along that journey, for me is very rewarding. I think I can speak for my team here as well. For a founder, you see somebody on LinkedIn, you fall in love with that person's profile and abilities. Can you send out a contract for signature before the end of the week? It's Tuesday today, 3 working days. Is that a yes or no? If it's a no, you might have a process problem, or at least a gap. And if that's a no, then maybe we should have a chat. HR directors, tricky. You have a compliance expert on your team, or somebody who really understands how to secure and obtain work permits for a person moving into the EU. That person leaves tomorrow. What are you going to do? Maybe we need to think about not just having subject matter expertise consolidated in a person. It's maybe augment that ability by having the right platform in place as well, the right infrastructure in place. Anybody thinking about expanding internationally, I would really question why you're doing it. Do you have to do it? So is there a necessity? Or is there a need or a desire? I think it's a very different scenario for a lot of people like that. It's way more enjoyable to work with smart, talented people, regardless of location. And if you haven't tried the distributed teams approach, it's never too late, but you probably want to give that a shot because it's a very rewarding experience.
Welcome to the Recursive Podcast. Today we are joined by a guest from one of the fastest growing tech companies in the world. The name is Deel. In just 6 years, Deel went from a small freelance payments tool to a $70 billion payroll and HR giant, helping over 35,000 companies to hire and pay talent across 150 countries. They hit $1 billion in revenue last year, and it seems that they are just getting started. Representing Deel in Central and Eastern Europe is our guest, sales leader, a SaaS veteran, if I may add, Ivan Valev. Thank you for joining us.
Thanks for having me. Thanks for making me sound way too senior. Very much appreciated.
No, appreciation is on us for having you here. And actually, I'm so glad that we have the opportunity to open up a conversation about talent market dynamics in Central and Eastern Europe, as we've been tracking this region for 5 years now. It seems that we have like 2 branding mechanisms on play with CEE. Being a nearshore, offshore destination has been like a title for so long. But nowadays, we are kind of moving from it. Still, there are some dynamics that play into this that other countries still don't necessarily see as being established market. So on that note, I would like to open up with how do you see CEE at the moment in terms of moving from that older connotation, especially as there's so many startups nowadays in Central and Eastern Europe, actually 12,000 of them. So there are also founders who are willing to look overseas for senior level experts in sales or product to actually scale up. Where do you see these dynamics of CEE moving? Is it changing? How is this affecting the region's talent?
I mean, it's a loaded question. There's many different ways to tackle it, but maybe we start off with a few definitions. CEE, Central Eastern Europe, depending on how you look at it, we're talking about 23 countries, 21 spoken languages, roughly 200 million people in terms of overall population. I think you mentioned 12,000, what we would qualify as startups. That's a fairly accurate number. It's actually 3x in the last decade. So there's certainly, that's part of the answer, is that there's a trend here to see more and more of these emerging companies. Now, usually people like to start off with a success story, so let's do the same. Historically, looking at CEE, we are roughly going to be looking at about 56 unicorns. So those upper echelon valuation, fantastic companies, fantastic logos. Just in the last 2 years, so 24, 25, we had 5 additional CEE unicorns join that large number as well. So there's a clear trend where we can see that there's more and more companies being built in Central Eastern Europe that are able to, quote unquote, make it. Which begs the question, why? Well, I'm not going to go into a history lesson here, but historically, it was always about cost. You think of Central Eastern Europe, when there's a unit of work you need to have done, and it's more cost effective for you to do it using people in Central Eastern versus somebody domestically. We are clearly witnessing a shift, and it's already there, away from cost into skills. So that's the kind of the epitome of that, is hiring somebody with a certain skill set where it doesn't really matter where that person is located. You go for skills over geography. For me, what I see every day is it's actually kind of a false dichotomy. It's not cost or skill, it's cost and skill, which is a fancy way of saying you can certainly remain cost effective, but also have access to amazing talent, which again, historically CEE is very famous for, especially when it comes to technical roles. So that's clearly part of the equation. That's a trend. We see it. It's here to stay, for sure. But certainly something must have changed, because 10 years ago, maybe 15 years ago, we would define CEE resources as nearshoring, offshoring, kind of looking at those so-called emerging markets. I think CEE is not an emerging market. It's an established market. That's another kind of high-level transition that we're seeing. And partially that's because there's one substantive change, which is, if you look at those 55, 56, who knows, maybe by close of business today, there'll be a 57th CEE unicorn. The pace is increasing. The common denominator is, for sure, this compliant infrastructure that allows founders and CEOs to hire people cross borders, where you're not limited by resources available to you just because they're next door. It's where you do the opposite. You prioritize skills, abilities, and to a certain extent, experience as well. Companies like Deel, that's what we offer to our customers. It's the ability to hire and pay people compliantly. That's been a game changer. That's why you see that the common denominator across all those very successful CEE unicorns is they have distributed teams from the very beginning. They're not focused on one market, one country where your entire workforce is located. It's more about picking and choosing the right person with the right skill set, regardless of location.
Absolutely, yeah. And as you mentioned, actually, we see more and more opportunity for startups from all around the CEE region that might have struggled before to actually hire a senior sales expert from, I don't know, UK or New York. That being headquartered in CEE isn't a liability, so to speak. And I guess maybe even from your perspective or experience, you must have heard a number of either occasions or examples of founders actually going from 3 to 5 contractors to actually expanding to 30 plus big teams. So definitely we know we can attract a world-class talents here, not just give our ICT specialists to the ones that are actually scaling the products and everything outside. So it's definitely a good dynamic that we can look forward to. And for that matter, whenever a startup actually gets to a certain point of hiring, the fast-growing scale-up, for example, or SMB, we know that time is the most expensive resource. So would you love for us to go into a little bit more details about how automating that boring parts of global hiring actually has directly saved the founders, the leadership of those teams enough calories to actually work through on something that's more efficient, that's more actually giving in returns for their business?
I mean, I would never classify admin as boring, but certainly there are more fun elements that belong to kind of building a company. I think in general, less is more. So we frequently talk to founders who are overwhelmed. Why? Well, there's multiple spinning plates. They have to play all the different roles that their business requires them to do so. Why? Well, because they have to find the talent, convince them to join. Meanwhile, they're also acquiring business to sustain the business and keep it going. And at the end of the month, that very promising salesperson that they hired, they receive their paycheck and their commission is wrong. They were paid less. Now, this is month one on the job, and a company you hadn't heard of before just paid you less than what you earned. Very likely looking at attrition. And that's the worst thing that can happen to a startup, is to bring in somebody very qualified, very capable, very promising, and then lose them right away. But why would that happen anyway? It's because the CEO, and because there was nobody else, the CEO had to look into payroll on Friday evening, probably around 1 p.m., more likely 11 p.m. at night. So this is why we see that automation to a certain extent removes a lot of the human error, or at least limits the risk when it comes to not just bringing in people, but also retaining them. Which is why we would like to say that automation certainly doesn't get rid of all the admin, but it most definitely helps. And I think the one thing that people don't really recognize as much as they should is, again, less is more. So if I'm a founder and I don't have to spend calories thinking about, is my workforce getting paid on time, every time, the right amount, that frees up bandwidth. Now they have less cognitive load. Now they have the ability to build out something new, start a new venture. Those onboarding journeys that we talked about, we need to improve. We never did. Well, maybe now there's time for that. Maybe there's, the development programs that we had in place for our teams, because we want people to grow with us. We want to develop them so that they stay with us and we retain them. Those are the things a CEO or a founder is likely to sacrifice when the biggest pain point is making sure people get paid on time every time. And that's one of the pains we alleviate.
Actually, when you mention that in Croatia, one community of HR specialists working in tech has been running a research every year about what ICT talents actually want, because there was this whole hype and craze, like we need to give them tennis tables, chocolate pools, like to pamper them, to actually get them, because the scarcity was there. So basically HR was making out all different kinds of things to actually attract ICT specialists. But eventually, like through those researches, every year it's been one staple thing always on the top, and that's the thing that you are mentioning: to have a clean paycheck, a sure way of having everything on the account as it sits there whenever it should, with no worry what's going to be next week or another month. So that's basically the foundation.
Performing a certain task and expecting to be paid for it, it's a simple thing. But simple things are not always easy. And what we find is that when something that is fundamental breaks, then you're definitely going to deprioritize every other thing you're doing just to make sure you keep your team intact. And that takes away a leader. Really, it just takes them away from being a leader. What about developing your people? What about testing out a new hypothesis? What about those 1,001 product ideas you wanted to bring to life? There's no time, but there's also no mental capacity for it. So sometimes you have to tick the most important boxes first.
Definitely. And it's like moving to next level of perfecting something, I would say. So even when we drive a car, like when we are just first starting, we look all around. We get lost in just holding the wheel, and we don't get the charm of actually getting the curve right or speeding up a little bit and feeling that buzz. To get there, we actually have to make foundations right, to not even think about what we are doing with our foot or the wheel. And I guess it's the same with these basics, as you mentioned. The best things on that level are if they are covered well, no one even notices. Right. And actually, on that note, you mentioned to me before this recording started that a customer cut their payroll processing from a full month down to just 4 days using Deel. So in a startup where the founder often is the HR department, no one can take care of that when you are just a small team of 3 to 5. What does recovering those 150 hours a month actually allow in terms of the AI age nowadays, especially? We can also see some higher up scale-ups who maybe even have a first HR hire. And there's now a combination of things what a platform like Deel can do. For a small startup, on one hand, that's definitely offloading that very expensive time. But for, let's say, more established teams where there's already 1 or 2 person in HR, there's also a question of how can HR approach that in terms of not losing the reins, and actually, if I'm going into my management with, hey, this platform might just do the work that I'm doing now, how am I actually going to get that acknowledged and say yes?
Probably the biggest beneficiaries are HR directors. For decades now, HR has been abbreviated, probably because if you look at the whole title, human resources, a lot of those leaders would emphasize the resources part, not so much the human part. Again, why? It's because you have to make sure your resources, the people working for the company, are paid and taken care of, and they don't leave. That was always the biggest challenge. And the way to do it is talking to HR directors. You would be surprised by how many manual tasks they own themselves because there's nobody else. Even if they have a team, that team tends to be on the small side. If it's a couple of HR coordinators, we're now talking about 20 plus Excel spreadsheets. Let's say one of those people leaves the business. Now there's a gap in the overall HR structure, but also subject matter expertise. Maybe that one person knew how compliance would work across borders. Person's gone, knowledge is gone. There's a delta now. The HR director has to fix it. I think in a lot of ways where we've gotten to, thanks to automation, that's only part one. Where things get very interesting is when you introduce AI into the mix, because now you are looking at limitless options as to what you can do. And in a lot of ways, I think with the right platform in place, an HR director can be a leader. They can own the human part of the equation. They can design development plans, talk about keeping talent well taken care of, benefits, whatever the case may be, versus just making sure people don't leave because their paychecks are wrong. I think it makes the HR role way more important, way more strategic within the business, because they're not just a person reporting to the board saying, everybody made payroll, job done. They can talk about what's next. What about culture? It's very rare that an HR director talks about culture when you ask them, what are your top 3 priorities? But that's beginning to turn. Now HR directors are saying, well, it's within my remit and it's my mandate to make sure that the company culture, such as it comes down from the founders, is really embodied in the day-to-day of the company. So it's again moving away from manual labor, which can be and will be automated or carried out by agents entirely, and focusing on the so-called softer skills, which guess what, are much harder. way harder to develop communication, that interpersonal intelligence. Those are the hard things that we have falsely for years now referred to as soft skills. And that's where an HR director can really have an impact and create value around.
Definitely, there's a change in a lot of things regarding HR with AI, and we are facing a lot of like different questions coming with it. And you also mentioned that you noticed some of the changes through the platform itself, with what type of talents is actually most sought after these days. Would you love to expand on that a little bit?
I mean, it's, again, change is constant. It's always evolving, ever evolving. I was reading our most recent global hiring report, came out a few weeks ago. The most sought after role, which saw the biggest increase, is something called AI trainer. That's a completely new role. That's a new category. It didn't exist 2 years ago. And now we're seeing a peak of, it's an increase of over 230%. What does an AI trainer do? It's not a person teaching other people how to work with AI. That's not what it is. An AI trainer trains the actual AI tools. It provides consistent feedback, distilled, filtered feedback based on the human component. It's called human in the loop. So that's fascinating. It means that companies are investing in hiring a person who will train their AI systems to be more effective, more proficient, understand and comprehend context better, apply to everyday problems and solve those problems. That's a fascinating new development. And if I recall correctly, a couple of years ago, we were looking at the increase of just hiring where you have job titles that contain those two very dangerous letters, AI. And we saw a huge increase, but that was across every possible combination. AI developer, sure. AI architect, maybe. But we also had things like AI artist. So that's essentially where this new wave started off with, where things are not defined. You know you have to have people that understand AI. So you're going to hire this very wide range of potential roles that are beneficial. And what we're starting to see now is, again, very early days, but things are beginning to gain a proper shape, which people can recognize. And I think AI trainers is a very clear example of where companies are headed, which is not just we are going to bolt on AI because we have to. It will be we fundamentally rethink what our business is, what we do, who we do it for, and then how do we do it. And for that, you need people who understand and can train those AI models internally for you.
And actually, even on startups level, I see many specialized solutions for a marketplace for AI skills. For example, we are going to have a startup that is in that realm on our CEE forum. And actually, that's the idea, helping people prompt engineer something on a really high level, not just everybody going in there and writing it as a human would do, but thinking on a really architectural side of things.
If I may just draw a quick parallel. I know what you're saying, and I think that's a very highly desired future state. Mm-hmm. But when I look at CE specifically in startups here, it's very exploratory, which means it's not just the CEO saying, this is how we're going to incorporate AI, and that's the way we're going to do it. It's giving people tools to build and develop and try and make mistakes and learn from those mistakes on their own. And I think that's probably even more important, because this kind of innovation that AI really enables, why would it be consolidated in a few people where it could come up across the entire workforce? It's back in the day, we used to say, lead from the front, right? It doesn't matter what your title is, you can still be a leader. AI is that, except it's a couple of clicks away, and you can actually build something that fundamentally changes the company. And I think that's a fascinating time to be a part of.
Absolutely, absolutely. I mean, there's two sides of this coin, and empowerment is definitely something that has a big thumbs up, definitely, in all regards. And when it comes to maybe a technicalities, so to speak. I would love to maybe jump into a compliance for that matter, and to draw more about what is actually Deel doing in the background, and looking from perspective of founders. So if you would, let's say, answer to me, what is the most common hidden cost of CE founders, that what they overlook when they try to manage global compliance?
I mean, this is certainly involved. It's evolved for sure. It used to be, hey, can I pay this person in Colombia? Compliantly so. And that's how things started. And then it was like, okay, so if I hire this person in Colombia or Mexico, don't know why I'm giving you LATAM examples. We can switch geographies, not a worry at all. The questions became more about, is this person actually part of my workforce? Do they avail of the same benefits that my, headquarter employees do? And now I would say the most kind of advanced level of that is, and we're really talking about companies who live in the future, and just look back at us and tell us how things are going to develop. What those companies do is they say, I hire this person because of their skills and their talent and their promise. They joined the company because they bought into the vision. I don't want this person to leave. So how do I develop them? How do I give them a platform for them to develop and run their career, own their career as part of our business? I think a lot of founders who've never hired internationally or cross borders before, they tend to err on the side of, I need to find the cheapest way to do it. And the cheapest way to do it is, compliance is a tricky, also loaded term. You could do it any way you wanted to. If you wanted to be not strictly speaking legal, you could probably get away with it a couple of times. But at some point, if the company grows, the spotlight will be on you. There's many examples of things gone wrong that have made the news because obviously it's very eye-catchy, grabs people's attention. Very typical example is, maybe not as familiar in Europe, but I think it is, at least in CEE, is Glovo out of Spain and Portugal. They got hit with 1 or 2 pretty massive fines because they had contractors that they were managing as if they were employees, without the benefits, without income tax, without Social Security. And at some point, you pay the price. And in that case, price was pretty hefty. And that's not an isolated case. There's going to be, at least within the EU, regulators are going to focus on misclassification. And that's probably the one email subject line you don't want to see the word be part of is misclassification. You don't want to see that in your inbox because that means you're going to be flagged. It means you're going to be fined. And there's obviously a very negative connotation if your business is associated with illegal practices. So I guess to sum up is, before you hire, think about who you're hiring, what are you hiring this person for, and really, really over-index on, am I doing this the right way? Just because even if you get away short-term, the negative consequences long-term, that's potentially business stopping. It could kill your business. And that's not a joke.
Thank you for that. And I hope it's eye-opening for some. Or at least I also hope that not too many startups or SMBs in CE need to hear it. But there are a lot of things happening on that realm, just because, as you said, one thing is shoved underneath the carpet, the other is overlooked, and there you go. In 1 or 2 years, you have a huge pile of problems.
I think it's going to be even sooner than that, realistically speaking. Again, from the regulatory perspective, if there's people that are now playing by the rules and there's a way for you to find them, you will probably do it if you're the regulator, and there's nothing wrong with it. Again, I think for founders, it's just not worth it. And it's a question of education. I would certainly be the last person to say founders are trying to, find a shortcut. That's not what this is. It's just lack of awareness in most cases. At the top, we said there's 20 plus countries in CEE. It doesn't mean that it's easy to hire, if you're a startup in Romania, to hire somebody in Moldova legally and compliant. It's not that easy. It's not that easy to do, provided you don't have an entity there just yet. So in those cases, what we would say is, take out the guesswork, talk to us. We can give a point of view. That's what we do for a living. We talk to startups every day. We're at least going to provide some guidance and information for you to consider.
Actually, Deel has been able to be such a good partner to SMBs and startups. And for that matter, I think one of the very key things was influencing that, and that is the amount of growth that you managed to do because you were on the spot in all of these countries, as I figured, 150 now. It's not that you were using third-party enablers, but you were there actually and scaling it from the spot. So I see that as one way of just telling people, hey, we know how things are working here, exactly in this spot. So for CEE, we know that, for example, Deel will have much more clear vision of what is being done in Croatia, how things are being handled in Bulgaria or Hungary. So if you want to scale regionally, you're good to go. And even if that means hiring global talents.
For very selfish reasons, I joined Deel because Deel did the hard things first. This compliant infrastructure is not a software subscription you buy. You have to build it country by country, unit by unit. And that's the hard investment that Deel made to make sure that we are compliant and physically present in those countries when it comes to, again, the unsung heroes. It's the HR people, legal, compliance. We have people in each and every country, which allows us to have a point of view, to have those experts on the ground that are always aware of the latest developments and changes. But I would say regional expansion, while it is important, again, there's no need to limit ourselves, but just by geography. Again, proximity is great because it gives you this false sense of reassurance and control. But what the business usually needs is talent first. The best salesperson will probably not be a next door neighbor to you if you're coming out of Croatia, for example. Might be, don't get me wrong. It has happened.
I absolutely agree.
But what we see is that startups that pick a geography that they want to expand into and say, we're going to test these 6 markets. And based on financial and commercial results over the next 2 to 3 quarters, we'll make a decision as to what we invest in, where we establish ourselves. So back in the day, you would do it. If you had enough investment, you would open up entities, have the local lawyers, make sure everything is crystal clean, and then you would say, okay, now I can hire these people in each and every country. That's time consuming. It's also pretty costly. I was talking to a founder about this maybe a couple of weeks back out of Romania, and he was saying, sure, we can open up an entity in Italy. It will be 4 months of work and about 30,000 euro. And at that point, you start hiring, not before. So for the right talent, speed is everything. Usually the best and most talented people are not on the market forever. There's a short window of opportunity where you could attract them, pull them into your workforce, take advantage of that talent. But if you're not in a position to do that, those people go. They're not going to wait forever. It's unfortunately how talent works, and maybe that's the way it should be. The really, really good people, you have to snap them if you can, when you can. So that agility, that ability to act quickly is what we actually provide. So if I'm a startup founder and I think about having a regional footprint, being the go-to brand in 6 different markets, my first response is typically, how do you know? Why 6? Why not 5? Why not 7? What makes these 6 so special? And even if there's a very educated answer, my follow-up is, have you tried it yet? And usually the answer is no. So what we ultimately provide is the ability for you to test your hypothesis on the ground in each and every market, get results, evaluate, and then make a business decision based on that. I think that's invaluable for a fast-paced, fast-growing startup.
Yeah, absolutely. And when we look back at things like a few years ago, I think in a nutshell, it really all started with COVID, unfortunately for that matter. Like this idea of talent first and actually looking at how can I get the best people, no matter what, from all over the world was so far to us just because we weren't ready to say yes to remote work. It changed so much for us, and I'm so glad that with that change came the change on the HR level, and that we get compliance platforms like Deel to actually drive that initial burst. And maybe with this, I would love to also hear your final thoughts, maybe 3 take-home messages that you would love to share with founders, SMB, entrepreneurs, HR, maybe leaders.
Right. Happy to do that. But before I get there, just a quick sidebar. I love CEE. I think it's the most fascinating region, not just in terms of growth and potential. I love the narrative arc. It's changed so much. It used to be the place you go to save a little bit of money, make your margins look better. And now we see this huge wave of successful startups that are global players coming out of CEE. And I think that narrative is fantastic. And the fact that Deel can play a part, at least a small part along that journey, for me is very rewarding. I think I can speak for my team here as well. With that said, take homes. For a founder, you see somebody on LinkedIn, you fall in love with that person's profile and abilities. Can you send out a contract for signature before the end of the week? It's Tuesday today, 3 working days. Is that a yes or no? If it's a no, you might have a process problem, or at least a gap. And if that's a no, then maybe we should have a chat. HR directors, tricky. You have a compliance expert on your team, or somebody who really understands how to secure and obtain work permits for a person moving into the EU. That person leaves tomorrow. What are you going to do? You have a gap, bit of a delta. You're the HR leader. It's your problem now. What are you going to do about it? I think maybe we need to think about not just having subject matter expertise consolidated in a person. It's maybe augment that ability by having the right platform in place as well, the right infrastructure in place. And I guess, 3 is a lucky number, so let's make it 3 take homes. Anybody thinking about expanding internationally, I would really question why you're doing it. Do you have to do it? So is there a necessity? Or is there a need or a desire? I think it's a very different scenario for a lot of people like that. And I would say really think about shifting your mindset away from get the team together and I'm going to play pool or get some free chocolate at the office. Those are fantastic things a few years ago. And to a certain extent, they still are a thing. And I have days where I miss them. But what I certainly would say is it's way more enjoyable to work with smart, talented people, regardless of location. And if you haven't tried the distributed teams approach, it's never too late, but you probably want to give that a shot because it's a very rewarding experience.
Thank you for that. And I hope we all learn much more about talent market dynamics in the future as well, for the sake of all of us, the employees, the employers, and also platforms that kind of enhance that connection. Thank you very much, Ivan, once again. Lovely to have you. And thank you all for being with us this episode as well. See you in the next one.